Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for turning out. This is a first for the Bookery. It's Dee's first outdoor event, and thank you for braving the elements. It's not too bad, is it? My name's Ann Cleeves, and it's my great pleasure tonight to introduce someone who's already been introducing herself to several of you, Ann Cleeves. Queen of Crime seems the appropriate title for Ann. She's quite simply phenomenal. In her time, she's been a child care officer, a women's refuge leader, cook at a bird observatory, an auxiliary coast guard, and a probation officer, all before turning to writing. And we've just been talking, the first 20 years of her writing, she wasn't doing this sort of thing. She was slogging away writing. She's prolific, and she's had immense success with several awards, not least in 2017, the prestigious Diamond Dagger of the Crime Writers Association. Her work's been translated into over 20 languages, and she's a bestseller in Scandinavia and Germany, and I think they know a bit about crime writers. Of course, many of you will know her for the adaptations of her work on the television. Numerous series of Vera, there's one on at the moment, starring Brenda Blethyn, and several series of Shetland. Last time I interviewed Anne in Crediton, we talked about her first book in the Shetland series, Raven Black, that had been chosen for the national initiative, The Big Read. Tonight sees the Devon launch, and it is the Devon launch, and the first time Anne is in person appearing to talk about it, of her second book in the Two Rivers season, The Herons Cry. The first in the series, The Long Call, won the Agatha Award for Best Contemporary Novel. And it's set in North Devon, the series. The novels feature Anne's latest creation, Detective Matthew Venn. As well as talking about this latest series, we're going to be ranging across her career a little bit. And of course, there'll be an opportunity for you to all ask questions at the end. So it'll be about 45 minutes of me questioning Anne, interrogating Anne, and you with about 15 minutes to ask your own. So, start thinking. Okay, so Anne, it is absolutely fantastic to have you here. Actually, can I have a round of applause for Anne?
I think a round of applause for Dee, who set it all up and who's got us here, despite COVID, despite everything else.
So Anne, my first question is, what brought you to set your latest series in one of the most beautiful places in Britain, North Devon?
I knew that I wanted to write something different because I was coming to the end of the Shetland series, and I'd written 8 books set there, and there are only so many times you can kill somebody off on an island that has 33,000 people. Since then, the TV drama have killed off a fair few more, but Shetland's beautiful, but it's one place. There are lots of islands, but there's a similar feel wherever you go. And I wanted to stop writing before I was getting bored, and before, more importantly, the readers were getting bored. So I knew that I wanted to do something different. I wanted to write something different, and but I wasn't sure where. I didn't know where I was going to go or what I was going to do. And then, quite unexpectedly, my husband died. And I wanted to run away from home. I was living up in North East England, in Whitley Bay, which is where we lived together and been very happy. And friends obviously wanted to say how sorry they were, and I just wanted to run away from all that sympathy and all the memories just for a little while. And where I ran to was where I'd been very happy as a girl, and I ran back to North Devon and stayed with a very, very good friend who I've known since I was 11. And while I was talking to Sue, and we were remembering school days, and there's another of my fellow students, BGS students there, I just started to form this idea of a possible character. And someone that we knew had grown up in quite an enclosed evangelical Christian order. And I thought that if you were an individual who'd been brought up with that faith and that certainty, and if you hit your late teens, you lost that faith, and you were unfellowshipped, you were no longer welcome within your family or within the group, then you might just turn to the police service for that security and to refine that sense of honour and duty that you'd had when you believed. And so that's how Matthew was born. That's who he was. And then the people who looked after me so well after Tim died were a gay couple, Martin and Paul. And they were the people I went straight to after the hospital, and they fed me wine and tea. And more impressively, I think they're still looking after me 4 years on. They're still great friends, and they're still a great support. And so I think I had this couple rattling around in my head when I started writing. And I thought, well, what if Matthew were gay? And that was a bit of a challenge, because I'm a straight woman and I don't have that lived experience, and I wasn't sure that I could do it honestly and with authenticity. But I gave it a shot and got it read by Martin and Paul and by another gay couple before it went off to press. And so Matthew's gay as well. And that works into the plot very nicely, because that makes reconciliation with his community and with his family even more difficult because of his sexuality. So a long-winded way of saying that's how it all started.
I mean, three of your main locales, one now North Devon, the Shetlands and Whitney Bay, you have lived in all of those places,
yes.
haven't you? How important is it to you that you actually know the place before you start?
I think I would really struggle to write a novel set somewhere I hadn't lived or didn't know intimately. I think you can do short stories about a place that you've just visited, because it suits the short story. You get that immediate excitement and recognition of the different, and that sense of, oh, so that's what this place is like. That strangeness that hits you, and that works brilliantly for a short story. But it doesn't work for a novel. For a novel, you really need to understand the community, I think. And that's what I love writing. My daughter is a human geographer, and her way of working is to look at the individual within the community and within the landscape. And I think that's what I enjoy doing most, is looking at how people grow out of the place where they are and where they live. And so, yeah, that's what I do.
All three of those locations could be perceived as being sort of slightly cut off from mainstream society. I mean, Braunton people may not like me for saying that, but North Devon is a bit different, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. It was even more so when I was living there before the link road was built. It did feel like a major trek to get to Exeter in those days. It's not quite as bad now, but it was like a real journey. And we didn't do it very often.
Yeah, I used to do Bideford, and I know what you mean, yeah. I used to teach in Bideford, actually. I remember a child going on an outing, and they'd never been outside Bideford. I mean, a lot of people kept themselves to themselves.
Yeah, I think so.
And a critic from the Times said of you, she likes things on the margins, be they gay detectives or out-of-the-way places. Is that a fair comment? It sounds as though it is what you've just been saying.
It is fair, but it's because that's what I know, I think. I don't like cities. I've never lived in a city. I would struggle to write with any sort of credibility about the mean streets of Camden or Manchester or because I don't know them. I feel safe on the edge. I like those marginal places. I like places with defined boundaries. So islands are great because you've got a real defined boundary if you're writing about an island. Northumberland is brilliant because you've got the North Sea on one side, the Tyne on the other, the Pennines and the Scottish border, so I know where I am there. Living in the Midlands would be a struggle for me, I think, because where's my patch? You know, how far does it stretch? And so, yeah, I do like to know where I am, and I do love being by the sea. That's important.
So is it just serendipitous that you've lived in these areas that you can write about, or have you actually thought, I'll get there and I'll write about it?
No, pure serendipity. I got to Shetland because I met somebody in a pub and I needed a job.
How you do it?
It was a pub in Putney. I mean, it wasn't a pub in Aberdeen or anywhere. And this guy was going off to be assistant warden in the Bird Observatory in Fair Isle. And he was moaning about, it was a cold and windy place and it was probably a very stupid thing to do to go and spend a season up there. And I said something like, I wouldn't mind spending a summer in Fair Isle. And he said, well, if you're serious, they're desperate for an assistant cook. And they must have been desperate because I knew nothing about cooking and I didn't know anything about birds. At that point, I didn't even know where Herons was. You know, I was a Devon girl. I vaguely thought it was one of the Western Isles, and it was only later that I discovered it was part of the Shetland group, and that it was a long way from anywhere, you know, like 15 hours on the boat to get from Aberdeen to Shetland mainland, and then another 3 hours on the most horrible boat you have ever been on in your life to get into Shetland. They call that boat, with I think some sense of irony, the Good Shepherd.
Yeah. Going back to Matthew Venn, your new detective, he's obviously very different from Vera and from Jimmy. I mean, could you just give us a short synopsis of what each one represents for you in terms of their main characteristics?
Yeah, I think Matthew Venn is a rule keeper. He likes boundaries. He's quite uptight. He's still haunted a bit by guilt because he wasn't there when his dad died, and he should have made more effort to be there when his father died. So he's not the easiest person to live or work with. He's meticulous. He follows procedure. It's quite different from most fictional detectives, I think. Vera, the other way, had a very troubled childhood, and is still, if she's haunted by anything, it's by Hector, her father, who was a stealer of rare birds' eggs and a trader in birds of prey and a dodgy taxidermist, and that was Hector. And poor Hector, I feel for Hector, because he would have been quite a nice chap if his wife had lived, but the love of his life died when Vera was a very small child, and Vera is no substitute. He would easily have given up Vera for the wife. You know, if the wife could have survived, he would easily have sacrificed Vera. And so Vera grew up knowing this, feeling unwanted, neglected, not very well looked after. She would have been the one with the completely wrong clothes going to school, and probably a bit stinky. We used to have those kids, didn't we, in our class? And I think that's why she is as she is, very strong, very tough, very independent. And Jimmy Perez is a Shetlander, so Jimmy Perez grew up on Fair Isle, where there were maybe 6 kids in the school and you were related to most of them. And then at the age of 11 he was shipped out to board in the Anderson High School in the hostel there. And how would that be? Suddenly you're in Lerwick, which has traffic lights and street lamps and bars and bullies probably at school, and so he's very much a Shetlander with long horizons. He's never lived anywhere with trees, and that's him.
Do you have a favourite?
No, that's like asking you to choose amongst your children. Even if you did have a favourite, you would never ever let on, would you?
Yeah.
Because the unchosen wouldn't be happy.
Yeah. On your desert island disappearance, you said that you weren't interested in writing about murderers or psychopaths. You're much more interested in exploring family and community relationships.
Yeah.
A little bit more about that later, but I mean, it seems to me that in the style of modern crime writing, you've created quite detailed backstories for these detectives. Do you enjoy that, presumably?
Oh, I love that. That's what I like doing. I think I need to understand them. I have no interest in creating monsters. I don't want to write about psychopathic serial killers. I just have no, I think there are very few of them in real life. You know, the murders that I came across while I was working as a probation officer were mostly pathetic, inadequate little men who had problems with alcohol or drugs or other forms of addiction. And they wouldn't be very interesting to write about either. So I write, I think, I hope, about ordinary people pushed to the limits and pushed to extremes, and we can understand them. And I want to understand my killers just as much as I want to understand my victims and what happens to the community when somebody you're close to dies and is a victim of violence.
Yeah, and I mean it's notable that in the second book of this series you carried on several of the characters.
Yeah.
Do you intend I assume you intend to write more.
Yeah, I do, and I feel that the Matthew Venn books are much more ensemble pieces. So we have a sense that this is a group of people that we can get to know over time. I hope, if you like them, then we can get to know them over time. So there's Matthew and his husband Jonathan, and Jonathan is as different from Matthew as it's possible to be. He's manager of a community arts centre. He's liberal, he's open, he loves his friends, he would have his house full of people all the time. Poor Matthew, when he goes home after a long day at work, is just hoping that Jonathan hasn't invited his friends round. He doesn't want to be there with a whole pile of arty people drinking wine and talking politics. He wants an early night. And I think that's the sort of tensions in that relationship play out in other relationships too. And I love writing that marriage because it's a happy marriage, but happy marriages aren't perfect marriages. And you have to work out the tensions and what works and what doesn't for people. And that's what I hope I do. But I love also the police team, so Jen Rafferty and Ross May. Jen Rafferty, who married too young before she had really any sort of life, and had children too young. The marriage turned abusive. She ran away to North Devon, and now is trying to regain those lost years. The time when the rest of us were going wild and having parties, she was washing nappies and feeding kids, and she wants that time back. So man, could she party? But she's trying to juggle that with being a police officer and being the mother of 2 teenage children. And I'm enjoying writing her very much. And one of my favourite characters is Lucy Braddock, who also appears in the Herons Cry again, and she's a woman who has Down syndrome. And the relationship with a very elderly father, who knows really he should be allowing her more independence, but he's lonely, and he loves the bones of her, and he wants to keep her at home and safe. And in the second book, she has moved into independent living and enjoying it very much. And if anybody knocks at her door, she beams at them and says, "Home, sweet home, come in." And I just loved writing, and that's sort of paralleling a friend of mine who has Down syndrome, and watching her blossoming and becoming more and more independent, and having her own place.
I was very intrigued to see in the foreword to the second book that you thank a couple of people for letting you use their names.
Yeah.
And they're not insignificant characters in the book. I mean, just give us a bit of background to that. Presumably they don't behave, they're not represented.
No, but we sometimes do charitable auctions, so people pay quite a lot of money to a charity. So I think in this one it was John Grieve and it was Cynthia Pryor, and they paid to have their name in the book. And the trouble is, they would love to be on television, but television companies are so wary of being sued that they will not use the name of a real person if they're anywhere near where the action takes place. And I did a charity auction for one of the Vera books. I'm trying to remember the name of the woman, but she had a Polish surname, and she was the wife of a surgeon in Aberdeen, and she was desperate to be a character in Vera on the television, and the producers refused to use the name because, and I said, but she wants it, she's paid a lot of money, but no, we can't do it. So
does that actually make you think at all about what you're attributing to them as characters, or doesn't it matter?
They don't mind, I think,
they
as long as they're in the book.
Yeah.
As they know that they don't have any say in what's going to happen to them. And I think the woman that I'm thinking of actually got killed off very quickly.
We must talk about what's happening. It's so exciting what's happened already with this the first book in the series. It's been filmed, hasn't it?
It has.
And
where
just,
we
just
finished
tell everybody a
filming.
bit about the cast. Wow.
Yeah, we've got a really brilliant cast, which is nothing at all to do with me, because the book was taken up by Silverprint Pictures, and they're the team that make Vera and Shetland So if you like Vera and Shetland, I think you'll enjoy this because they brought the same rigour. They really get my books, I think, and that sort of element of kindness that's at the heart of them, that I don't want to be cruel. I have an optimistic nature about human nature, and so I think you'll enjoy the show. And yeah, we've got Ben Aldridge plays Matthew Venn, and he's a Devon boy, and he is very, very committed to the role. And who else have we got? We've got Pearl Mackie plays Jen Rafferty. Juliet Stevenson is in there. She plays Matthew's mother. She's absolutely astounding. Martin Shaw plays Dennis. Neil Morrissey is in there, but Neil Morrissey seems to be in everything at the moment. Who else? Anita Dobson is brilliant in it. I've not seen her since she was on EastEnders, but she is absolutely stunning in this. I think she's done mostly theatre ever since, but she is brilliant in this show. I went to watch them film a bit, so I did watch them a bit.
And they filmed in North Devon?
Yes, most of the interior shots and some of the sort of blander, any house would do kind of shots are filmed near Bristol, because that's where the production team is based, and obviously they want to save money by filming there, but the exterior shots, yeah, are filmed in North Devon. When I was there, we were at Hartland Quay, where it blew and rained and rained, and I felt so sorry for those actors who were so cold. And in Ilfracombe when the sun came out, so they were all eating ice cream and having a great time.
Can't wait. Sounds really good. So do the TV producers, are they waiting for your next creation of detective, you think? Because I mean, you've had extraordinary success with Vera and with Jimmy, and now it's going to be successful with Matthew Venn.
Well, I hope so, yeah. No, I think, in a way, it's a pity because there are so many fabulous younger crime writers out there who deserve a chance. And I do feel incredibly greedy. And I know that every crime writer in the UK makes a little wax model of me and sticks pins in it every night. Because it's just not fair that I should have 3 series on television, because there are some, yeah. And I think it's about, well, we've done 2 and they've done very well, so let's stick with it rather than take a punt on someone we don't know. And also, I never meddle, so I'm quite easy to handle. So I think they quite like me.
Does it work the other way around though? For example, if you take Brenda Blethyn as Vera, you've written books since then in the series, haven't you? Does it play with your mind at all? Her interpretation, or does it influence you at all, do you think?
I think the way that she does the witty put-downs are brilliant, and I think I've perhaps worked more of those into the books now than I did to start with. And I'll sometimes write a line of dialogue and think, well, I hope the script writers keep that in, because Bren's going to love saying that. So yeah, I love that. And I think sometimes if she's got a new script writer and she's not sure, or there's something that she's not really sure about, then I sometimes get a little email. They've got me doing, I'm not sure our Vera would do that, do you? So, which is lovely.
She's along the lines of Miss Marple, isn't she? I mean, she's become a bit of a treasure.
She has, I think Brenda is a treasure, and she's so generous to me and so gracious. So we have done book festivals together where she sat and signed books. She's even signed Shetland books, She doesn't mind. And she said, you do realise this isn't a Vera book? Oh, no, just sign it. So she does.
Yeah, how nice to know that she's,
Oh no, she's lovely. She got what they called a Poirot Award for services to crime writing, handed out in America, in the US. So we went over to this crime writing convention called Malice Domestic. And I'd been a few times, and I thought I did all right out there. I was relatively popular. You should have seen the queue for Brenda. Like a queue out the door and round the building 5 times over. So yeah, just to get a selfie with her, and she is so well loved there.
You've mentioned already that one of the topics that is included in both these books is this religious sect, the Brethren, and presumably you'll go on and that will continue as a
not as a major bit of the plot, I think, but as a background and as maybe Matthew becoming more and more reconciled with his mother, and it might become a part of the plot. And I don't want people to think that I'm having a dig at religion or that it's a cruel community, and it's definitely a fictitious community. I call them the Herons Brethren because I know that there's nothing of that name around. And Heron is the... Have you got anything to say?
I'd be a Heron maid.
You're a Heron maid. Well, that's fine. So yeah, I call it Heron because that was the Roman name for Barnstable. And so it is a very small enclosed group, but it has elements, I think, of other religious communities. I think in the certainty, it's in that absolute positive certainty that they are chosen, that when the day comes they'll be saved and nobody else will be. And it's that, having relinquished that sense of being a chosen man, that is there with Matthew, that he knows that he's not chosen, he's not special, he has to work for what he's getting, and that, I think, makes him a really, really good police officer.
So are there topics that occur to you that you think, oh, I'd like to write about that and weave that into my book? So
yeah, it's more that I start off with a theme or a general voice or a tone or a world, and it's quite hard to explain. The last of the Vera books was called The Darkest Evening, and that was very much looking at feudal Northumberland, because Northumberland is still pretty feudal. You know, there are lots of big houses, tied cottages, that if you lose your job you also lose your house. But the people in the big house are struggling too, because they might be land rich but they're fairly cash poor, and they're very reliant on the people who work for them, because they're quite practical folk, and the people in the big house very often aren't. And so I really wanted to explore that. In a way, it's exploring modern class, isn't it? A rural class in rural communities, which is probably very much the same still in bits of Devon. And so I start off with that general theme and general idea that I want to run with, and then the plot comes later, because I never plot in advance, because that would be boring.
Oh, I'm glad you've gone there, because I was going to go there too, to ask questions about it. So let's get into this, you know, how you became a writer. I mean, were you always good at English at school?
I was okay at English. I was very slow because I wanted to get every word right. So I quite often didn't finish essays in the time allowed, because I struggled a bit. I couldn't just dash off a composition. You know, I couldn't make something up on the spur of the moment. I needed time to think about it. So I never shone really in English, though I loved it, and I loved literature. French was my thing more, but I suspect that was just because we had a very good French teacher.
So do you think your English teachers would have been surprised, perhaps they were still alive, to find out about your success? I don't know.
I don't know. They maybe would. I think I was fairly middle of the road generally. I didn't really stand out much at school, but loved especially the sixth form, and that chance to explore ideas, to read widely, to read and read and read and share those ideas with friends. That was important.
And what were you reading when you were a teenager?
Anything. I mean, literally, I would go through, well, I'm going to read American literature, I'm going to read Russian literature, and just would read lots of set texts, obviously. I loved the French, actually. Camus' La Peste was one of my set texts, and that's come back to haunt us a bit recently, hasn't it? What's been going on there? But my comfort reading, what I read when I'd been dumped by a boyfriend, or I was feeling miserable, or just out of sorts, was always traditional crime fiction. So, Golden Age crime fiction, not so much Christie. See, I think Agatha Christie is really cold and ruthless and cruel. She did write serial killers that you couldn't really understand, you know, that their motive was something quite kind of trivial and not very credible. And she she kills schoolgirls. You know, we wouldn't be able to do that these days. Not just in the, and she was very mean to servants. She didn't mind killing servants off at all. But I think that, but it was, I loved Dorothy Sayers. And I suppose even back then, I loved Simonov. If anybody here has aspirations to be a crime writer, read the Maigret books by Simonov. He's so spare and so tight. And in one sentence, he can move the plot on, he can describe a character, and he can give you a sense of place. I've never known a writer be able to do so much with one sentence as Simonov. And Penguin are reprinting all his Maigret novels, so they're certainly worth seeking out, because I think they're fabulous.
So do you think Christie's slightly overrated?
People love her. I mean, I wouldn't stop people reading her, but then I wouldn't stop people reading Enid Blyton either, and I moved on quite quickly from Enid Blyton to other writers, like the wonderful Malcolm Saville. If we're talking children's mystery writers, Malcolm Saville was there. Anybody else read Malcolm Saville? Yeah. Did you? I loved him. Yeah, I wish I still had mine. The Lone Pine Club. I used to get mine out of the library though. We didn't have many books at home, and we read a lot, but it was always a Saturday trip to the library, which is why I'm passionate about fighting for libraries. And Sue, give us away. Lovely little librarian there. So yeah, I'm really passionate about supporting libraries, as well, of course, as our independent bookshop, because they can provide context for books. They can explain things. If you go onto Amazon, you just see what you already know. You can't find anything new or interesting or strange. So use your library and use your indie bookshop. Otherwise we'll lose them all.
So going back to your crime writing, when did you first start experimenting with crime writing? And were you, I mean, you've read a lot of crime, so was it difficult to find an original voice, or how did you set about that?
I think I was quite pretentious when I started writing, and I thought I was going to write a great work of literature. And I'm quite good at creating character. I can do that all right. But you can't just have a load of interesting people sat in a room talking. Something's got to happen. And I really struggled with plot. What was going to move these people? How was I going to make any kind of action happen? And it was only when I thought, well, I killed one of them off, actually, that things started to move, because with traditional crime fiction, you don't worry about the plot. You've got a plot, you've got a murder, you've got a limited number of suspects, and you've got some form of resolution. And that sounds very simplistic, but it is in a way like a corset that holds you up. It's not a straitjacket, I don't feel contained by that. I can still explore quite intricate and interesting topics within that form. So like rural class system, or how somebody from that sort of, with a strict religious background, can go out into the world and become a very useful human being. But the form is there for me, the structure is there for me, and it keeps me going, that structure.
So, I mean, you said to me earlier when we were chatting informally that the first 20 years of your writing life, you were not that big a success.
Absolutely, not commercially, no. And I'm so grateful that I wasn't, because it gave me a chance to get better, to practice the craft of writing without any pressure, because nobody had heard of me, nobody expected anything of me. I sold just enough books to keep the accountant at the publisher happy, and just got gradually a bit more confident. The books got a bit better, and I would hate the pressure that young writers are under now. And again, this is where libraries come in, because I wouldn't still be a writer if it weren't for libraries, because but when they had a strong book fund, they would buy new writers, or what they call mid-list authors, so people who aren't terribly commercially successful, but did all right with the library leadership. They would buy hardbacks of those books, enough to keep the publishers happy and to keep me published. And stopping funding libraries doesn't only harm readers, it harms the breadth and the variety of writers that are coming through, because we might end up just with commercially successful writers if there are no libraries to support and buy and collect and promote other people.
So going back to your early books, have you tried recycling? I mean, do you ever reread them?
No. There is talk of them being reprinted, but I'm asking the publisher to make sure that the jackets look very different, so that people will have low expectations.
And have you recycled any of those ideas that you had?
No, because they were of their time, and I think because I'd been reading a lot of golden age crime fiction before I started writing. The first series had an amateur sleuth with a double-barreled name who'd been to a posh store, very like with independent means, very like the heroes of the golden age. And he tripped over bodies on nature reserves and in wild country places, and they're quite fun, I think. But they're very different from what I write now, and I think I'm fine for them to come out again, because I think they might amuse people and you might find them quite interesting to read. And some people I know really did enjoy those early books, but I'm not writing those now, and I don't particularly want to go back and revisit them.
Would you want to write a careful foreword to them?
Oh, that's an idea, yeah. But then you don't want to diss them either, do you?
No,
because some people might really enjoy them, so that's a bit tricky.
Yeah. So if you wouldn't mind doing this, when you sat down to write the Herons Cry, could you just give us an idea of how you set about it? What's the chronological?
Yeah, the first idea came in a library event, and I think it was in Kingsbridge Library. And I was talking about books, and a member of the audience stuck a hand up and said, I work in investigations for the NHS, and I tell my team, be more like Vera, be compassionate, but be dogged. And I thought, is there an investigations side of the NHS? That's very interesting. But before I could nab her, she disappeared. And I asked the bookseller, who is that woman? Yeah, I want to speak to her. Is there anybody I can speak? We never found her again. She went. But that had stuck in my head. So the victim in the Herons Cry is working for a small organisation called North Devon Patients Together, that is a sort of patients advocate group, a bit like Health Watch, but is investigating a complaint against the NHS because the family believed that a lad with mental health problems wasn't properly served and he committed suicide. So that's how it started, just with that idea. And then I got quite intrigued with the image of glass, because my friend's daughter is a glass blower, and that idea that when glass is hot, it's molten and you can form it into any shape that you like, but then when it's cold, it's brittle and it can just snap. I'm thinking that there are people a bit like that, they're pliable and amiable and they'll be whatever you want. And then there might come a time where something pushes them to extremes and they just crack. And so the body in the Heron's Cry is found in a glassblower studio. And that's visually very interesting, because I went to watch, and it's hot, you've got the furnace, you've got all these odd instruments that look a bit like instruments of torture, pincers and tongs and blow torches all hung up on the wall. So it does feel a bit like Dante's Inferno, or a bit like a torture chamber. So that was quite interesting as well. So I've got this lovely doctor who's investigating this case of possible negligence on behalf of the health authority, and he's found in his daughter's studio stabbed with a shard of glass. That's how it starts.
There you go. Okay, so on the practical side, after that, you've got your idea.
Yeah.
So I think you said a little bit earlier on, you don't plot.
No.
That would be boring.
Yeah.
So does it just go? I mean, how does
I
it
write
work?
like a reader, so I write the scene. It starts off with Jen at a party, and she's drunk, and this guy comes up to her and wants to talk to her and says, "Can I talk to you?" And then he sees that she's not really in a fit state to have a serious conversation with, and she says, "Yeah, just." And she thinks he might be chatting her up because she's in that sort of frame of mind as you can sometimes get, and this is the victim. And later she's kind of haunted by the fact that if she'd been more sober or if she'd listened to him properly, they might have been able to prevent his death. And then I write then it's quite easy then to write the finding of the body. But then I need to know what's going to happen next, so I have to write the next scene. And then we carry on.
So you haven't got a list of characters that you're gonna
No.
sort of you just go with the flow.
Yeah.
Wow. Because it's quite complicated. I mean, there's a lot of characters.
There are, and sometimes I have to get to the end and think, no, there's too many characters in this, I'll cut a couple out, which takes a bit of rewriting, or sometimes it doesn't quite work and you need to rewrite a bit more. But if I knew how it was going to end, there would be absolutely no point in writing it. Because that's the interesting bit, isn't it? I work it out at about the same time as the detective.
So does that mean then you're not sort of dropping clues in there for the attentive reader to be picking up in the arc?
Yeah, I do, but I sometimes do that as I go along, but randomly, because you want lots of red herrings, so there are lots of clues dropped which point in one direction or another direction.
Indeed, yes.
And when I know who did it, then I'll go back and just make sure that it hangs together and I'm playing fair with the reader, because I do love, as a reader, that cheap thrill of the surprise ending. I love that. And if you could give that, sometimes you can't, but if you can provide that to the reader, that, oh, so it was him. I should have known. Of course it was him. Then that's good, isn't it?
It's very good, yeah.
You can't always do it, but sometimes you can.
Yeah.
It's nice to do
Yeah.
that.
So you don't know who's done it until the end, more or less.
Yeah, 2/3 of the way through I've got an idea. And then I know where I'm aiming, and that's, hurrah, that's good. That's a bit of a relief.
And does this make an editor very important, because of picking up mistakes you may have
Yeah,
made?
absolutely. You need an editor because you're so close to the writing when you're writing that you see everything very clearly, and sometimes you forget to tell the reader what you can see. So you do need that.
Yes. I mean, have you ever written books where you've had readers writing to you saying that doesn't work because so-and-so you
Yeah,
left that bit out?
most people are quite kind, and we have things called copy editors, and copy editors go through and check things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just checking too. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's copy editors are wonderful. They check for continuity. And did I say he had blue eyes at the beginning and brown eyes later on? And they pick up those sort of, so they are quite good at picking up mistakes. Sometimes things slip through, but generally it's pretty clean. By the time I've read it, it's been edited by my agents. It's been edited again by my editors here and in the US. It's gone through copy editing, proofreading. By the time it gets to you, it ought to be okay, really. But things still do slip through.
Okay, well, it is about time, I think, to throw it over to the audience. So has anyone got any questions? It's going to be a question of you speaking very loudly, because I assume we haven't got roving mics.
And we can repeat what you said.
We'll repeat what you said if we missed the
Oh,
question.
we've got a mic.
Is there always a roving mic?
My lovely, lovely Emma is going to wander around and will give you the answer.
So, anyone think of any questions? Got a question?
Yes.
Yes. Hurrah! Well done.
Gentleman at the end.
Hi, good to meet you finally in the flesh.
It's lovely to meet you, and thanks for coming. Thanks to everybody for coming.
I may have met you on Fair Isle, but the cooking was very good whoever did it.
It probably wasn't me then.
And the boat trip was magic. The captain of the boat put little morsels of food, and the skewers died and didn't take his fingers off to the food. So I enjoyed that.
What
trip.
year were you there?
Oh, about 15 years ago.
Oh no, I was there in the mid-70s. I was there for Tennessee warbler and Siberian ruby throat.
Thanks. So I love Shetland, and I love what happened on TV. I'm just wondering, because the book and the TV series seem to fit together very well, do you occasionally get a preview of what happens on TV and nudge the producers or directors to change it a bit, or
no, I really don't meddle. I do get a preview because I'm invited to the read-through, and the most recent read-throughs have been by Zoom, obviously, because we're not allowed on set and they're being very COVID cautious. But I do know what happens because I'm there watching on Zoom when the actors are also reading their bits, which is lovely. I never meddle. I was determined right from the beginning that I would say it's a bit like handing a child for adoption. You have a choice. You don't have to give your child to a production company. Once you've given it, I don't think you've got a right to interfere, because I have a very clear vision when I'm writing my book. You know, I can see very clearly what's going on, and I think that the director and the scriptwriter ought to be allowed that same privilege to have a clear vision of what they want to do, and me saying, oh no, my character wouldn't do that, or no, Vera wouldn't say that, is going to muddy their vision and make it a less good piece of television.
Thank you. Well, finally, will there be a murder on Lindisfarne one day?
You'll have to wait and see. Has he read my latest Vera book?
Will there be a murder on Lundy?
Oh, I would love to do so. I love Lundy. So just a tax-deductible trip to Lundy to do research for a new Matthew Venn book. That would be fun.
Yeah, question here.
I've got quite a loud voice.
Well,
I think
use
the
the
people
mic,
at
'cause it's
the back
lovely and
won't.
clear. It's really, really nice.
Yeah.
Hello. I was curious when you said earlier about so many young crime writers. What do you read? And when you read it, are you reading it for sheer entertainment, or are you reading it for inspiration or tips or edge?
No, I read, to be honest, at the moment I read what I get sent a lot, because it's tough if you're starting out. And sometimes somebody who's a bit more established saying, wow, you really need to read this book, it's brilliant. It's going to give them a bit of a boost. So editors do send me books to read. And at the moment I'm reading Chris Hammer. Has anyone read Chris Hammer? Australian. He did Scrublands Silver. And I think he's brilliant for a sense of place. He's just wonderful. So if you've never read him, give him a go. So I'm reading the new book, which is called Opal Country, and it's equally good. So look out for that when it comes. But there are lots of great, interesting new crime writers coming through.
Your own personal recommendation?
One in the front.
Hello, I'm just wondering, because you said that you very much build up the characters in your mind, that's where you feel that your strengths mostly lie. So if you've got a character in your mind and say you're in Barnstable, do you sort of see them wandering around to kind of build the story, or is it all at your word processor?
In a sense, it's more like acting, because I don't have a clear view of what my central characters anyway look like, because I'm in their heads looking out at the world. I'm not outside looking in at them. So it's very like acting. I need to get inside their skins and understand what they're thinking, what they're feeling. And that's a bit of a different process, really. So that's how I work. So in each of the books, I'll write from the point of view of the main detective team, but also from other people, a couple of people who are also a part of the action, part of the plot.
Interesting question. Another?
Yeah, you go for it.
I've been a keen watcher of the Father Brown series, G.K. Chesterton. And I've always sort of felt in reading your books that you have to look for the character that is the least unexpected person that is likely to be the murderer. And I wonder, is it in your mind when you're doing it, that you think that's the person that's least expected?
Yeah, but then when I'm reading, I'm looking for that as well. So sometimes you have to make them quite a strong character or quite a central character because you want that surprise ending. But I'm looking out for the least, the least expected. So it's a kind of double bluff, isn't it? Yeah, sometimes people hide in plain sight. Yeah.
Any more?
Yes. Well,
Hush out. You're very good at writing landscape and setting.
yeah.
You're ever so good at writing landscape and setting. Do you ever sit in location and just write what you're seeing and hearing and feeling, or is it all already in your head?
I think usually it's in my head because I don't often write real places. I mean, sometimes Crow Point I needed to go to get that as right as I could because it was a real place. But quite often I make places up, partly because I don't really want to have somebody really nasty, you know, a killer living in a small village. Everybody's going to be looking and wondering who it is that I'm thinking about. So I try and fictionalise very small communities, I think. And they're just in my head, and sometimes real places change in my head as well. So it's a mixture of both, really. So I suppose Hope Street in Ilfracombe in the books is Oxford Grove, I think, very much. You know, that steep street going down, which is becoming slowly gentrified, but certainly never was in the days which it used to be known, I think, as Addicts Alley. So things do change, and I'm very interested in how place changes and how that affects the people who live there, the established people, but also the incomers, and it's how these different communities bump into each other that I'm really... So landscape matters only insofar as it affects people, I think. Vera couldn't have grown up anywhere other than the Northumberland Hills, because she's got that long view, both figuratively and metaphorically. In her head she can see what's happening miles away, and that's important for her work.
That probably leads on to my question, because in the long call you set the town in a place called Lovercott.
I know, and I made it up. I didn't realise it was a real place until after.
And that's really funny you say that, because we moved down to North Devon just before Christmas. We were driving from Torrington to Barnstaple, and I said, "Oh God, look, there's Lovercott. It's actually a real place." So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you.
I probably had seen the same signpost as you, and it stuck subconsciously in my mind. But no, that was supposed to be a fictitious place, and it's a kind of Devon-y sort of name, isn't it? So I try and get the names about right. So there are quite a lot of combs and cots.
They'll be having, coach alerts, won't they, going into having a look. I mean, we were talking about this earlier, about the effective Vera on Whitney Bay and so on.
Yeah, we do get location tours now, which is quite fun. People book coach tours to see where the books and the TV shows were set, which is, I think, is lovely.
So North Devon have embraced itself for some location tours.
Well, I think, yeah, when I first wrote the book, The Long Call, the North Devon tourist guy was, "Oh, this is brilliant, we're going to bring so many people in." Well, I think COVID has done that for it. I don't think it leads me to bring anybody else in, does it? I think, I think we've got time for one or two more questions, if anybody has one. But if you're freezing, I won't be at all offended. If you want to just go home and get warm, or go to the pub. Yes.
Your detectives are very distinctive characters, and have you ever imagined what it would be like if they met each other?
Oh, people were always asking, can you not bring Jimmy Perez and Vera together? And we were thinking that it might make quite a fun, those charity things that they do on the spoof ones that they do on the telly. And Brenda did appear in one, there's a charity theatre thing in the northeast in Newcastle called Sunday for Sammy, and it's raising money in memory of a young actor who died too soon. And they did get, they got Kevin Whately, they got Jimmy Nail, a number of the Georges who had played detectives, and then in came right at the end, bursting through these men, was Brenda in her Vera outfit, and she loved it. It brought the house down. There was so much affection for her that she, yeah, and she still remembers that, I think, as one of her top moments. Do we have one last question before we let you all go and get warm, or buy books? Stay and support Dee and buy books. One last question at the back, please, Emma.
Yeah, hello, thank you. It's been a fantastic occasion. I just wanted to ask, because you mentioned you're an optimist, and yet your books are dealing with the worst of human nature, really. And how on earth do you stay optimistic when you're dealing with the bad?
But don't you think the wonderful thing about crime, traditional crime fiction, and why Vera has been on the telly in repeat after repeat throughout COVID, is because there is a sense at the end of order restored, of some sort of resolution, that things will get better and things will get back to normal. And throughout this time, I think that's what we've all been longing for. And I think that's why crime fiction has been really popular to read and to watch throughout lockdowns that we've had. And it is that optimism that somehow things will be sorted out at the end. And I think that's why and it's quite interesting that the golden age between the wars was also the time of the Great Depression, the Jarrow Marches. It wasn't all people having fun in big houses. It wasn't all Downton Abbey. But those people who were struggling were also buying Agatha Christie and hoping that everything would turn out right in the end.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I've been watching Agatha Christie, and always used to say she was rubbish, so even now I'm like, yes, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, I think there is that reassurance that justice, and the whole sort of politics, and especially in America when we were watching that justice will out in the end, and that's something that we want to believe in, I think.
I think that's a great question and a great answer to end on. Actually, that's really, really excellent. I would like to thank Anne. I mean, she's just such a lovely person, isn't she? Apart from anything else, apart from being a brilliant crime writer, and very frank and so forth, and for answering the questions so honestly, really, and openly. Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to thank all of you for coming, and I don't know, I'm starting to feel a bit chilly, but I don't know if anybody else is. There are, of course, and of course, once again, must thank the Bookery, Dee and so forth, for organising this event, which I think is, great success. And it is that thing of feeling things are starting to change and get better, maybe, hopefully. There are books on sale. They are signed, but Anne would then, obviously, if you wanted them personalised, she would be prepared to do that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, certainly do that. Yes, if you want to buy some of the backlists, they're there too.
So thank you all very much indeed for coming, and let's thank Anne.